Welcome to another episode of Ahtna 101. In this episode, which is Ahtna Place Names Part 2, we'll learn about a dozen more new Ahtna place name words. I'd like to start off with Cantwell. It's a village that's pretty close to Mount McKinley National Park boundary, and although in English we call it Cantwell, the Ahtna name we call it is Yidatanina. Yidatanina. Not far off from there is a place that we used to live in called Valdez Creek Village. My understanding is my father lived there for a while, and even though we call it Dghelaay. The Tazleena River and Tazleena Village is it's where I'm from. My village is called Tazleena Village. I belong to the traditional native village of Tazleena. Tazleena comes out of Tazleena Lake and turns into Tazleena River. It's the subject of my book, The Great Death. And Tazleena just means swift water. It's a very fast river. The village of Copper Center, which is a township more than a village, I think, is now we call it Copper Center in English, but in Ahtna we call it Klotika. In fact, our community hall is called Klotika. In the old days, not far from there, was a place called Wood Camp. It's where the old steamboats would come up, pull ashore, and purchase from my tribe firewood that had been chopped and stacked and dried to fuel the steamboat. And so that place, even though we called it Wood Camp, was really called Tawesta, not Wood Camp. There's a community called Kenny Lake, and that whole region. Even though it's called Kenny Lake today, we call it Dghelaay. Djinn is the word for muskrat, so basically it means like muskrat place. We already talked about things like Chetna, we call it Chedna, but how about the three mountains, or the four mountains you can really see from our area? Well, one of them is called Mount Sanford, and Mount Sanford we call Hwindindi Kirtani. Hwindindi. See the D? Just beside that, almost right behind it, is Mount Drum. And Mount Drum, almost the same size, we called Hwidandi Kirtani. The difference seems to be something like upriver of, or downriver of, or left of, or right of, or in front of, behind of. We're not entirely sure of what it means, but it's not called Mount Drum or Mount Sanford. Just down the way from that is Mount Wrangell. Mount Wrangell's a very high mountain. We call it Dghelaay. Mount Blackburn is the tallest of the mountains, named after an explorer, Blackburn. But we, for 1,000 years, didn't call it Mount Blackburn. We called it Katsitladi. Very different. Mount McKinley, the biggest mountain in North America, 20,320 feet. We never called it Mount McKinley. That was named after, a vice president of the United States at the time. We, for thousands of years, just called it Dghelaay. And, no, we call it Dghelaay Keke. Keke just means big. Dghelaay means mountain. So we just literally called it the big one. The big one, the great one, the big mountain. Keke, I might say Keke Hluke, the big salmon. Or I might say Keke Denigi, the big moose. The Clutina River, my uncle has a bunch of land on Clutina Lake and the Clutina River. It's just called Klatina, and it means like undercurrent river. It's a pretty dangerous river on the lower end especially. And Clutina Lake, from which the river comes out of, we call Clatibena. I told you in one of the episodes, Ben or men just means lake in our culture. Stay tuned for part 3 of Place Names in Ahtna.